he has credibility because he is a guy that spent decades in the national security space prior to being national security advisor for Donald Trump. But he and Trump are at daggers drawn at this point. They are not friendly. And it's hard for me to see, Maddie, there not being some level of political targeting here. The decision to raid his home seems pretty extreme. Obviously, more details to come, but it's hard to separate this out from the fact that John Bolton has emerged as a very high-profile critic of this president.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I'm joined by Chris Cillizza. He's a former CNN host and an American political commentator. Chris, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report again.
Surely, happy to be here.
Well, we've got to start off with this breaking news, and it really is breaking as you and I speak. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who's a frequent guest here on the Trump Report, it's been made official that he's had his home in DC raided by the FBI at the order of FBI Director Kash Patel, who has tweeted that no one is above the law. Now, we have hardly any information on this. We've had no response from John Bolton. We've had no clear commentary on what this could be about. But if we could speculate, Chris, what do you think it is about?
What I've seen, Maddie, is that this is about classified documents and the possible retention of classified documents by John Bolton. For people who don't remember, John Bolton wrote a book. John Bolton, former national security advisor for Donald Trump in his first administration, wrote a book called The Room Where It Happened, in which the Trump administration was very unhappy, but is very critical of Trump. And they tried to block the book's publication, insisting that Bolton had used classified information that he should not have held on to to inform the book. Bolton is, in the United States, one of the most active, in terms of television and media appearances, critics of Donald Trump. And he has credibility because he is a guy that spent decades in the national security space prior to being national security advisor for Donald Trump. But he and Trump are at daggers drawn at this point. They are not friendly. And it's hard for me to see, Maddie, there not being some level of political targeting here. The decision to raid his home seems pretty extreme. Obviously, more details to come, but it's hard to separate this out from the fact that John Bolton has emerged as a very high-profile critic of this president.
Absolutely. And you mentioned these classified content in his book. Now, this was, he faced government scrutiny over this, but the civil case was later dropped in 2021. So, I mean, this could be Trump coming back. He's back in power. He's back in charge of the FBI, and where they really throw their attention and their weight, Chris, something the Republican Party would argue that the Democrats did when Joe Biden was in office. But I wonder, is it safe to say that this might be, well, we don't know if it's unjust, but it might be Trump just using his presidential powers, take advantage of the FBI and basically bring up this investigation again?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see what they find, right? But it seems to me very clear. Donald Trump has made no bones about the fact that he is in favor of using the Department of Justice, which the FBI is within, for his own sort of flights of not fancy, but his own, he wants his political opponents to be targeted. He's been pretty plain about that. John Bolton is a political opponent. Now, if John Bolton broke the law, John Bolton broke the law, right? Regardless of whether or not he and Donald Trump are politically at odds. But let's see what happens there. I do think Donald Trump has made it very clear that he is willing to use the arms of the federal government to make things uncomfortable for people with whom who disagree with him. This, at least in the decision to raid Bolton's house, feels a little bit like that.
And we'll have more information on this as the day goes on, because I've mentioned to our viewers and audience that at this point in the day, you and I don't know much about it. It has literally only just broken. It's very early. It's only 8 a.m. Eastern time where you are, and where, of course, he is as well. So let's move on to kind of what's been happening in the Trump space when it comes to international affairs. Of course, we've seen a lot of reports from analysts in the last few days saying that peace efforts between Russia and Ukraine are dwindling. The conversation has slumped. We're dragging this along after what we thought was going to be quite a positive outcome on Monday. Now, we're still waiting, Donald Trump's still waiting for Vladimir Putin to confirm a time and place for this meeting with Zelensky, the potential meeting. So are you under the impression and in the group of people, Chris, who believe that Donald Trump really needs to be putting the pressure on Putin right now, either threatening more sanctions or even going as far as to actually implement them to get him to the table?
Well, it feels like 6 months ago, but it was 1 week ago today that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were flying to Anchorage, Alaska for this, summit. So it's moved in diplomatic terms, Maddie. It's moved really, really fast. I mean, diplomacy tends to move very slowly. On last Friday, Putin and Trump met. Monday in D.C., basically every major European leader, and Zelensky and Donald Trump met. So I'm willing to sort of give Trump the benefit of the doubt because we are, 3.5 days removed from that meeting. I think it's very hard to be like, and now we have a deal. I mean, he set these unreasonable expectations for himself when he made this ridiculous claim during the 2024 campaign that he would end the war between Russia and Ukraine on his first day in office. No, that was never going to happen. You're talking about two sovereign powers, right? His ability to go in there and say like, okay, stop fighting, guys, was always very limited. I think this is a test of sort of both Trump's relationship with Putin. Remember that he was caught on a hot mic with these European leaders on Monday saying, I think he wants to make a deal for me. Trump believing that Putin is incentivized to make a deal to help Trump. And then also, to your point, how far is Trump willing to go in terms of penalizing Russia and Vladimir Putin? Going into that summit last Friday, Donald Trump said that if there wasn't a ceasefire, there would be, his words, severe consequences. Well, we came out of that summit with no ceasefire. And in fact, Donald Trump saying, actually, we don't need a ceasefire anymore and no severe consequences. Now, he may be, again, it's a short time frame. So he may be waiting to see, okay, well, maybe we can get Putin to the table with Zelensky and with me without this, without these punishing economic sanctions. But at some point, if you're going to use the carrot and it doesn't work, you're going to have to use the stick. And the sanctions are clearly the stick in this situation. I don't think he wants to do it, but I think Putin has to believe Donald Trump will do it. I don't know if he does.
Well, at the very least, you would hope, and we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, Chris, but you would hope that Donald Trump was at least calling Putin or members of the Kremlin to request that he hurry up and make a decision on when this could be, because Putin said he was open to it after Trump called him on Monday while European leaders and Zelensky was still there to gauge what he thought about it. And it seemed, we thought that this was going to happen within the next few weeks. Trump said it would happen within 2 weeks. So I think this silence has only, I guess, added to people really thinking that Trump might not deliver on the situation because he's, of course, been quite unpredictable in his in whose team he's on. So
well, and Putin, to your point, Maddie. I mean, the other thing too is like Putin could well just be playing for time.
Yeah, which history would tell us that he is, Chris.
And that's a situation. Look, Donald Trump has struggled to effectively deal with Vladimir Putin. He just has. I mean, you've seen it just in this 7.5 months of his second term. He comes in saying, we have a great relationship. I don't know why everyone thinks it's bad that we have a good relationship. Then, Putin would clearly tell Trump, like, yeah, I'm interested in peace, and then send a bunch of rockets and drones into Kyiv, and Trump would get publicly annoyed. So it's been up and down. I think the question is, Donald Trump thinks he can read and manipulate and negotiate with anyone. Vladimir Putin has proven to be his biggest challenge. And, the question is, does Donald Trump finally have a read on Putin or not?
So true. Now, I want to get your thoughts on kind of what's happening on the ground, Chris. So the Friday's meeting, you mentioned it, we're a week past Friday's meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Afterwards, he was met with a lot of criticism for, I guess, having Putin walk all over him. As you mentioned, he went in there saying, if there is no ceasefire, when I leave this meeting, there will be severe consequences placed on Russia. We didn't hear anything about a ceasefire in the press conference or the remarks made from both leaders afterwards. So Trump, he copped a lot of criticism for, again, kowtowing to Putin. So I want to get your thoughts on what's happening on the ground. How do you think Americans are viewing Trump right now? Do you think they're looking at the situation thinking that Trump is looking weak on the world stage?
So, Maddie, I always warn folks who are abroad not to overestimate the extent to which the American public is paying attention to anything as it relates to politics. I hate to say it because it paints us in not a great light, but especially when it comes to foreign policy that does not directly impact the U.S., right? We're talking about a war in a place that people know where Russia is, but I'm not sure people know where Ukraine is in the United States, to be totally candid. Like, I don't know how much people are paying attention. I think when there's an outcome, more people will pay attention. So if Trump is able to get Putin, Zelenskyy, and himself, or Putin and Zelenskyy without Trump at the table, if there is a peace deal, I think people will dial in. And I think no matter how they get to it, this kind of sausage being made process that we're witnessing now won't matter that much. If Trump is able to get the fighting to end in Russia and Ukraine, obviously he won't have done it himself, but he will take credit for having done it. That will be a major win for him. If Putin just kind of refuses to play ball, or Zelenskyy won't give some of the land that Putin wants, and there is no deal and the fighting continues for another 6 months or another year, I think broadly speaking, the public would say, well, Trump said he was going to end this and he didn't. But don't assume that the American public would turn against Donald Trump because of that. First of all, the public is so polarized already. The American public, there's 42% of people who love Donald Trump and 42% of people, maybe higher amounts, who hate him, and nothing will change that. So you're really talking about less than 1 in 5 American sort of voters in the American public whose opinion is at all changeable. So there's that. And then there's the fact that really, like, people do not pay very much attention to foreign policy that they believe does not impact them.
It's all about the economy and money in the pockets, I guess, for ordinary Americans. But Chris, Trump clearly responding online to the world's impatience over getting this peace deal over the line. He said, "It is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense but is not allowed to play offense. There is no chance of winning. It's like that with Ukraine and Russia. Crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden would not let Ukraine fight back and only defend. How did that work out? Regardless, this is a war that would never have happened if I were president. Zero chance. Interesting times ahead." So your reaction to that post on Truth Social, Chris?
Well, first of all, he's obviously never seen the Italian national soccer team's approach to playing, where they only play defense and try to play for draws and then win it in PKs. But look, Trump is someone, I still remember during the heart of COVID, that he was asked about the lack of, very early on in COVID, first 6 months, there was a major shortage in masks and those sorts of things. And he was asked about his responsibility for that. And he said, direct quote, "I take no responsibility for it." He's not someone who is going to own negative news and negative publicity. I don't know. He says this all the time, that this is Joe Biden's war. I mean, ultimately, like, Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine. I mean, it wasn't Joe Biden. Trump's argument is, well, Biden was too weak in terms of Putin wasn't afraid of what Biden would do, and therefore he went in. Again, to our earlier conversation, though, the question is Putin afraid of what Donald Trump will do, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the lingering question out here is, if Joe Biden was too weak in Donald Trump's imagination, then in theory, Donald Trump, who projects, that he's strong and tough and willing to do whatever it takes, then that should have a different result with Vladimir Putin. To date, it hasn't. Now, he did meet with him, right? And many in the Trump world will say that's a success. Trump's critics will say he should have never met with him. So there's a step there. But again, there is still the war going on, right? It is still, people are still dying. So It's hard for me. I think Trump can say this is Joe Biden's war all he wants, but ultimately it's neither Joe Biden nor Donald Trump's war. But one of them, Donald Trump, pledged that he was going to end this war and is clearly focused on it. And at least to date, he hasn't done it. Now, maybe we will have an announcement later today in the United States that Zelensky and Putin and Trump are going to meet, and that's a major step in the right direction. But as of right now, it hasn't happened.
I think, yeah, and I think the other thing with what Trump is saying is that under Joe Biden's administration, he had restrictions on how far Ukraine could use American military and weaponry to shoot into Russia. They could basically only defend the country. They couldn't attack Russia, which was a significant problem for the Ukrainian army. I've had a lot of military analysts on the show that have said it was like Russia was playing with one arm behind their back. So, of course, when that was taken away, well, when Biden decided to revoke that, it was a great thing for the Ukrainian army. But, of course, it's just a knee-jerk reaction for Donald Trump to be able to shift blame onto the Biden administration when there's a bit of controversy and criticism over how he's handling this war. But the reality is, whether you like Trump or not, the conversation has kept in the headlines for the last 6 months, which is the main thing. Because, of course, when we had the Israel and Hamas war break out, the conversation really died down on Ukraine and Russia, and that's not good for when you're trying to get a resolution. But I'm going to move on to quite a interesting comment from JD Vance, Chris. He was in a Fox News interview on Wednesday or Thursday, and he was asked from Laura Ingraham about reuniting with President Zelensky at Monday's meeting. Of course, we take us back to the late February showdown and the ambush from JD Vance to President Zelensky, and he said that he had told the Ukrainian leader, "Mr. President, as long as you behave, I won't say anything," and said that Zelensky chuckled to that. So, I mean, imagine being the Vice President of the United States and telling the Ukrainian president, who was literally in DC asking for help to end a war that he didn't ask for, that he must behave. And I mean, he was trying to make a joke, but it was an interesting way to go about it, Chris.
I always say in humor, there's always a little element of truth. And yeah, yes, J.D. Vance was clearly trying to make a joke and make light of how much attention that showdown in the White House in February got. But man, if I'm Volodymyr Zelenskyy, I think to myself, I'm sure Volodymyr Zelenskyy was like, that has to annoy you. But I mean, look, I was surprised, candidly, that Vance got into it the way that he did with Zelensky back in February. But J.D. Vance is someone who, on foreign policy, his views and Donald Trump's views are not exactly aligned. He is much more in what we would call, I think, the isolationist wing of the Republican Party, which is why are we spending all this money in these foreign wars that have no real impact in the United States? It's a gigantic break from how Republicans have long defined sort of America's role in the world. But he is much more in that camp than Trump. I mean, Trump plays sort of that card, but I think he's not as much of a true believer in that world as J.D. Vance. So maybe it was driven by that. But yeah, kind of an awkward joke.
Yeah, and Zelensky had clearly been kind of prepped and prodded on how to behave in the Oval Office in terms of, you laugh at the jokes, let Trump speak about what he wants to speak, wear a suit, make light of the reporter asking why you're back wearing a suit or wherever it may be. It was an interesting, contrast to put both the meetings together. But into some more domestic news now, Chris. A state court in New York, they have thrown out Trump's $465 million fine in his civil fraud case. Now, this is one of the charges against Trump that was not dropped or stalled once he became the president. So the court was split over what to do, and they decided to toss the fine out against the president, saying that it was too big to justify. So, I mean, this is a huge win for the president.
The guy, he one of the things that's consistent throughout his whole adult life is he's incredibly litigious. And he often wins. And
He's got 9 lives, Chris.
He really does. He really does. And look, he is wealthy enough that a $450 million fine is not going to bankrupt him. But yes, this allows him to champion the fact that this was always a made-up violation and that he never really did anything. Now, I will note that Donald Trump is still, after this decision, he is still banned from leading a company based in New York City for 3 years. His sons, Don Jr. and Eric, are banned for 2 years. They can form companies in other states. I mean, this is not the end of the world. But yes, I say it again and again. The man, particularly in the legal arena, has tremendous luck, even to the extent, Maddie, where him being convicted of 34 felonies wound up working in his favor, politically speaking. I mean, it is really a remarkable thing.
I mean, I just, like, when we were talking about the John Bolton FBI raid and seeing photos of his house outside of DC, I was having flashbacks to Mar-a-Lago being raided and all the breaking news straps. And it's just funny to compare the pair because, now that Trump's in power, he's, he knows he's free, but in not so much of a win for for Donald Trump, Chris. A federal judge has banned the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, and Donald Trump from bringing new detainees to their detention center known as Alligator, Alcatraz, which is in the Florida Everglades. Now, the state said that they had to begin closing operations there within 60 days. So they can no longer haul migrants into this detention center. Now, this was obviously quite controversial when Trump officially opened it in early July. He said it might be as good as the real Alcatraz. So do you think that Trump will try and contest this, Chris?
Yeah, because the thing about it, Maddie, is that's important for people to know is this isn't about whether or not immigrants can be sent places. This is about, because federal money is going to this prison, which is run by the state, which is very rare in the United States, it has to conform to federal environmental regulations. And basically, the ruling by the judge was they didn't do an environmental assessment of the potential damage that building this place would do to the Florida Everglades, which is obviously a very protected wilderness area. So it's not really a ruling about immigration and what Donald Trump is doing for people who are here in the country illegally. It's a ruling about they shouldn't have built this without doing an environmental study. My guess, Ron DeSantis is already in the process of building another very similar prison in North Florida. The Everglades are obviously in South Florida for people who are not super familiar with American geography. So the question is like, okay, well, will the one in North Florida be subject to these same regulations and questions or not? But to be clear, like, yes, this is a setback for Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, but it's not really a setback about immigration. It's a setback about the environment.
Well, I wonder if Trump will take it as a setback for his mission to reduce migrant numbers, Chris. He will, I would guess, do two things. He will say this is the judiciary run amok, this is wokeism, and he will file suit because this is not a final ruling. He can appeal this. They will appeal this. And then I think he'll just kind of proceed with the process of helping support DeSantis in building this other building, and then they'll see what happens. I mean, again, back to our earlier point, this is a guy who's got incredible luck. Ultimately, with the legal systems, he probably looks at his life and says, well, the legal system weirdly has been pretty good to me. Like, well, I'll just keep pushing it, because his legal philosophy has always been, just because he is wealthy, and now we're talking about the federal government is financing this stuff, these appeals. Just keep appealing, just keep filing complaints, just overwhelm people with paper, and eventually you will win or they'll get sick of doing it. So my guess is he'll continue to do that. Chris Cillizza, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thanks, Maddie.